What if the most powerful military alliance in human history just suffered a silent internal coup without a single shot being fired? For 77 years, the world has operated under one unbreakable rule: Washington holds the keys to NATO. But this afternoon, behind closed doors and far from the prying eyes of the media, that rule was shattered. While the world was looking elsewhere, the leaders of Europe's heavyweights, France, Germany, the UK, Italy, Spain, Poland, and the Netherlands held a secret summit with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. There was no schedule, no press briefing. Even Washington was kept in the dark until the ink was already dry. This isn't just a policy shift. It is a fundamental hijacking of the Western defense establishment, and the details coming out of this meeting have sent a shockwave through the Pentagon that can only be described as an existential crisis. For decades, NATO has functioned like a hub-and-spoke system with the United States as the immovable center. If you wanted alliance resources, you needed a green light from the White House. But Mark Carney just walked into the room and proposed to bypass a $95 billion alternative security partnership fund. On the surface, it sounds like a technical accounting change. In reality, it is a financial guillotine designed to sever the U.S. veto power. This fund isn't about Canada asking for a bigger slice of the pie. It's about Canada and Europe baking their own pie and lock the kitchen door so Washington can't get in. Imagine a house of cards where the bottom card, the U.S. security guarantee, suddenly decides it might just walk away. That is the fear gripping European capitals. They've watched the political volatility in Washington, the shifting winds of the White House, and they've realized that relying on a single unpredictable partner is no longer a strategy. It's a suicide pact. Carney's proposal is a complete overhaul of how NATO manages resources and decides what constitutes a threat. If this plan moves forward, a nation that perceives American policy instability as a danger could get full alliance backing without needing a single signature from the State Department. This is the most forceful challenge to American leadership since the alliance was founded in 1949. We are talking about a total coup for NATO. It removes the United States from its role as the unchallenged judge, jury, and executioner of Western security. The Pentagon and NATO headquarters are currently in a state of pure disbelief. Why? Because Carney didn't just suggest a new bank account. He suggested a new reality where the U.S. is no longer the essential nation. To understand how we got here, we have to look at the mechanics Carney is using to dismantle the old guard. He admitted during the summit that the current consensus-based budget is broken because it gives the U.S. a permanent kill switch over any significant move. That arrangement worked when there was blind faith in Washington. But when the U.S. itself becomes the source of instability or threatens to make security conditional on political whims, the consensus requirement becomes a cage. Carney's remedy is brilliant and brutal. He wants to establish a funding process based on qualified majority voting rather than total consensus. Under this framework, the $95 billion would be contributed by members who choose to participate. The U.S. wouldn't have to pay a cent, but here's the kicker. If they don't pay, they don't play. They lose their say in how that money is spent. Decisions would only require 60% approval, no more vetoes, no more American gatekeeping. Any NATO member facing a security threat, including economic coercion or the sudden deterioration of security obligations from another member, could tap into this fund. If you read between the lines, Carney is building a survival kit for a world where the U.S. walks away from its allies. He is pitching strategic insurance to leaders who are tired of being told their safety depends on the mood of whoever happens to be sitting in the Oval Office. The momentum behind this proposal is not just talk. The receipts are starting to hit the table. The first and most significant endorsement came from French President Emmanuel Macron. For years, Macron has been the leading voice for European strategic autonomy, arguing that Europe is a continent, not a customer of the American defense industry. During the video conference, reports indicate Macron didn't just nod along, he put his money where his mouth is. France has reportedly pledged up to $15 billion toward this alternative fund. When the nation with the second largest military force in NATO and a permanent seat on the UN Security Council decides to back a move that bypasses Washington, the geopolitical gravity shifts instantly. Macron sees this as the ultimate escape hatch from American overreach. But the real surprise, the one that sent chills through the State Department, was the reaction from Berlin. Historically, Germany has been the most cautious member of the alliance, the anchor of consensus that never wants to rock the boat or offend the Americans. Yet, Chancellor Olaf Scholz reportedly told Carney that Germany is now open to structural changes that strengthen alliance resilience. In the coded language of diplomacy, that is a massive departure. Scholz admitted that if NATO cannot address concerns about American reliability, the alliance loses its core credibility. While Germany hasn't written a check yet, their willingness to even discuss a U.S. free funding mechanism is a signal that the traditional pro-Washington bloc in Europe is evaporating. Then we have the UK conundrum. As the most loyal partner to the U.S., the United Kingdom has always been the bridge between the two sides of the Atlantic, but even that bridge is showing cracks. Prime Minister Keir Starmer reportedly told Carney that Britain shares Canada's deep-seated concerns. He didn't reject the fund. He didn't defend the American veto. Instead, he stayed open to investigating measures for collective security. If the UK eventually flips and supports this, it marks the end of the special relationship as we know it. It would be a public admission that even London no longer trusts the American security umbrella to stay open when it rains. The situation in Eastern Europe, however, adds a layer of high-stakes friction. Countries like Poland and the Baltic states are caught in a terrifying vice. They rely on the physical presence of U.S. troops to deter Russian advance, and the idea of Washington withdrawing makes them look at the map with genuine fear. But they also see the writing on the wall. If the U.S. can threaten to abandon a G7 partner like Canada, what hope do they have? Poland's defense minister reportedly signaled that while they won't publicly join the fund yet, they won't stand in its way either. They are essentially staying neutral while the house they live in is being renovated without the landlord's permission. This shifts the entire power dynamic that has existed since World War II. For 77 years, the operating manual for the West said that American military might, intelligence, and financing were the oxygen the alliance breathed. Carney's suggestion is a declaration that the alliance can breathe on its own. It asserts that if European and Canadian resources are deployed efficiently, they don't need American consent to defend their own interests. This institutionalizes a world where the U.S. loses its primary leverage, the ability to use security guarantees as a bargaining chip in trade or diplomacy. The Pentagon's reaction has been nothing short of a five-alarm fire. Senior military officials have been in emergency sessions all day. They aren't worried about a Canadian or European invasion. They are worried about the collapse of the hub and spoke model. This is the bedrock of American global supremacy. If NATO countries can coordinate and fund operations without going through Washington, the U.S. is no longer the indispensable hub. It becomes just another spoke. And if this works in Europe, other regions, Asia, the Middle East will start asking the same question. Why do we need a security guarantee from a partner that might change its mind every 4 years? By early evening, the panic reached a fever pitch. At 6:15 p.m., the U.S. ambassador to NATO was briefed by European colleagues. The news went straight to the National Security Advisor and the Secretary of State. By 7:30 p.m., a National Security Council meeting was called, and sources describe it as chaotic and tense. The Pentagon argued that Carney's plan is an existential threat to American leadership that must be stopped by any means necessary. The State Department countered that this is a self-inflicted wound, a direct result of years of rhetoric that questioned the value of allies. The intelligence community added their own warning. If this fund is approved, the most sophisticated information-sharing network in history could fall apart because it relies on a U.S.-led hierarchy that would no longer exist. When the clock struck 8:45 p.m., the tension finally reached the Resolute desk. Sources claimed that when the briefing landed, the response was vintage Trump. Faced with the news that America's oldest allies were building a bypass around his authority, he reportedly shrugged it off with a "let them." His logic: if they don't want the U.S. in NATO, the U.S. will leave, and they can see how long they last without American steel. But behind the scenes, his advisors were spiraling. They tried to explain that leaving NATO isn't just about walking away from a bill. It is about handing over the keys to global security and destroying American influence for a generation. By 10:15 p.m., a massive rift appeared within the U.S. government itself. While the White House was issuing warnings of dire repercussions and calling the fund an assault on the core of NATO, the Pentagon released a completely different, much more restrained statement. They emphasized that the U.S. values its partners and urged dialogue within existing structures. This is a public contradiction. It shows that the American military leadership is effectively trying to signal to Europe, don't listen to the rhetoric from the top. We still want to work with you. This internal fracture is exactly what Carney's plan was designed to exploit. On Capitol Hill, the political battlefield is just as divided. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer called the proposal a damning indictment of an administration that destroyed allied trust, labeling it a national security disaster that fractured the alliance more than any foreign enemy ever could. Meanwhile, staunch allies of the president, like Senator Tom Cotton, took a harder line, essentially daring the Europeans to try and defend themselves without the American war machine. It is a house divided against itself, and the world is watching the cracks widen in real time. To see where this leads, we have to look at the three most likely scenarios for our future. In the first scenario, Washington blinks. Under immense pressure from the Pentagon and the defense establishment, the U.S. makes a massive concession. They reiterate that Canadian sovereignty is unassailable and pledge renewed commitment to intelligence sharing. In exchange, Carney shelves the fund. It's a temporary peace, but the insurance policy remains on the table, ready to be pulled out the next time Washington turns unreliable. The second scenario is the dual NATO. This is where the fund actually goes live with its $95 billion. In this world, NATO stays together on paper, but in practice, it splits into two rival engines. You have the U.S.-led organization focused on China and Russia, and a European-led organization focused on their own collective security. The U.S. keeps its bases, but it loses its seat at the head of the table. The special relationship atrophies, and the world moves from a unipolar American era to a fragmented regional one. The final and most extreme scenario is the total disintegration of the post-World War II order. Incensed by the fund, the U.S. withdraws from NATO's integrated military command. In response, Canada and Europe formalize their new union completely independent of Washington. Seeing the collapse, Asian partners start making their own arrangements with regional powers. Within 5 years, the American military dominance that defined the last century isn't ended by a war, but by a series of meetings and bank transfers. We are standing at a historic crossroads. Within the next week, we will see if France doubles down, if Germany signs the check, and if the UK finally picks a side. Carney hasn't just proposed a fund. He has started the clock on the demise of U.S.-led NATO. The unchallenged leader is being challenged from within, and the geopolitical map may never look the same again. What do you think? Is this the end of the American era, or can the alliance be saved? Drop your take in the comments right now.